Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, we've been taking a deep dive lately into the world of recruitment because let's face it, the job market is a little bit bananas this day. But we're going to talk a little bit of insider baseball. We're actually going to look at it from the talent acquisition side and simplify down how to leverage better data to improve recruitment for major corporations. Now, my special guest today, he is the founder and CEO of HireClix, which he also has 20 years of experience in digital marketing, e-commerce, recruitment marketing businesses with success in strategic alliances, sales, and business development. He also has a strong depth of knowledge when it comes to managing marketing return on investment for clients because he goes in and he learns a client's greatest pain points and works to build a strategic plan customized to address those challenges and achieve their business goals. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Neil Costa. Hey, Neil.
Hey, Mary. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, when Shannon Taylor referred you to us a couple of months ago, I was like, oh, my little ears perked up because it's so fascinating to think about the data behind talent acquisition and how to improve the process overall. Reduce the time to fill from the point where they post the job to hiring the best candidate. But for people who maybe are like, well, why should I care about this?
Yeah.
Let's start at the basics. Why should we care about data analytics when it comes to recruitment? And what happens if we don't track or leverage our data, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's Shannon's a great guy and someone we've worked with quite a bit. So he's one of those folks that, we've taken on that journey that you just described, when we actually had worked with them in a place where you had no visibility into the data. And, at this stage in the game, if you're in recruiting or a leader in HR, you've got to be able to explain. If you spend $1, you have to be able to explain what happened. And that's not always easy from a data gathering perspective, a data reporting perspective. And then you're really doing the analysis to figure out, what do we do next? And I think that's really the whole enchilada, is going through all of those things.
Yeah. And bottom line is you want to reduce that time to fill. You want to find the very best candidates that if you hire them now, they're not going to bounce 6 months or a year down the line. And ultimately, you want people that are great, at their job too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to, a lot of people, when you make those hires, when they vote for you, you vote for them and it works out, you've got to have the visibility into where they came from. And, so you can go back and revisit that source when you have a similar job in a similar location, or, there's a lot of guessing in recruiting, and we're really trying to take the guessing out of the analytics and the recruiting side of things.
Yeah. And if you guys heard my episode with Shannon Taylor, we'll link it up in the show notes for everyone. By the way, everything we talk about today, you can find over at thesimplifiers.com. But Shannon is the director of talent acquisition at JCPenney. So talk about volume hiring, retail storefronts all across the US, a corporate office in Plano, Texas. I mean, they're going through a volume of people that they need to find great talent and positions to fill. But I think what we're going to talk about today is applicable to a small business as well, right?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, just like if you were a small retailer and you had one store, you're analyzing what are your costs per sale, what are your sales for the day, and how many hours did people work? So you've got to have a focus on any metric, and people metrics at this point in time are more important than ever. It's a really strange and dynamic labor market.
You say that again.
Yeah.
And if you're not tracking your people metrics and when it comes to recruitment, you're kind of shooting in the dark, I imagine, as well. Like what other risks are there if you're not really doing this and keeping your finger on the pulse?
Yeah, I mean, the number one risk is that you don't have the people you need when you need them. The other part that's a risk is that you're overspending for them because you're doing this, kind of shotgun approach to advertising and marketing your jobs, and you really aren't learning every time you hire someone. And I think that's the biggest thing when you've got Shannon at JCPenney, and it's a really diverse group of hiring. You've got the retail jobs, but you've also got warehouse jobs, and you've also got buyers, and there's just a for each of those categories, and just like if you had a restaurant and there's the servers and the chefs and and the pastry chef, and like where do they all come from and what did it cost for me to get someone on my team? And that's important for any size business for sure.
Yeah. And from a strategic HR point of view, what you want is evidence-based data and evidence-based decision making, not just kind of basing it off of an anecdote you heard from one recruiter here or one there, right?
Yeah, what we're trying to really help people do is that let's look at the data, let's analyze the data and the campaigns that we have to at some point, when you get enough miles on the car, then it becomes predictive. When we say, hey, we need 5 people for this type of role or 50 people for this type of role, we should have the data that says, well, then we should be able to spend, X amount of dollars and get Y amount of hires. And that's really an important, thing to have. That transformation is a really important moment when it comes to recruitment marketing.
Awesome. So let's geek out about data. All right, here we go. So what are the 3 most important metrics that you should be tracking in your recruitment marketing, in your opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's we have cost per apply. What does it take for me to get a completed application and someone, through the door? That's number one. Cost per quality apply is the second metric. And what we say quality, that really means, what that means. Each employer defines that differently. That could be, someone I can send over to the hiring manager. That might be someone who gets to the first interview or second interview. So knowing what sources produce that cost per, an efficient cost per quality apply is really important. And then the last one's cost per hire. We also think that, again, that's what gives us the idea of how do we turn this into a predictive metric? If I can put a little asterisk and have a fourth, time to fill is also really important. You alluded to that a little bit earlier, and I think that's one. From the time I post the job, how long does it take for someone to get into the seat?
And we're looking at this from the lens of recruitment marketing. So this ad spend that you're pushing out to the world in order to make sure you're, getting in front of the right eyeballs, the right type of talent for those roles. So, you might come in and look at this from an HR point of view of like, hang on, cost. We're looking at it from how you spend your recruitment marketing dollars, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's who we serve. We serve the HR leaders, the CHRO, VP of Talent Acquisition, and they're trying to at scale in a lot of cases. But if you're spending thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, or millions of dollars, we're trying to figure out this. There's a lot at stake again from the productivity of the company. And when someone's not there, what's the lost revenue if you don't have a salesperson or you don't have manufacturing people, or but it's really the HR team we're trying to bring these key metrics to and help them learn and be efficient.
Again, based on evidence-based decision-making rather than anecdotal, because I think that this piece is so integral. I can imagine when you think of the entire employee life cycle, you're thinking about retention rates, you're thinking about performance reviews, not once you've got a person into a role, how are they doing? Are they the right talent for that role? Are they delivering results? Are they driving revenue goals? What's the turnover rate as well? So if any of those metrics are starting to tank, we all know the old adage that it costs so much to replace a person when they exit that, by keeping an eye on those also starts to help you realize, I imagine, okay, we need to tighten up our recruitment marketing spend and how we do this to make sure that we're bringing the right people in the door from day one, right?
Yeah, you can do that. It's really important to do that. And some people do that with qualifying questions on the front end. Some people do that with, video on their career site or on their social channels. Yeah. And those videos aren't always done to attract people. We talk about having realistic job videos. Like some people may watch a video and be like, I don't think that job's for me. Sometimes it could be to help qualify people. The other part is that a lot of companies need to figure out what their employee value proposition is. Just like a product has a consumer value proposition. If you don't know as a company what you're offering, you're creating a chance for a mismatch there, right? If your value proposition to that employee doesn't match what the employee needs to be successful and happy and really enjoy life and meet their goals, then there's a mismatch there. So I think that's also an important part. That is, do you know yourself as a company, and do you have a good defined employee value proposition.
Neil, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I'm going to put a pin in that conversation because I want to get to that at the end. But before we get there, if we're talking about running some marketing campaigns to help keep your pipeline full of great talent, you told me offline that there are two real key marketing campaigns that you should run. Talk us through them and what are their objectives, strategies, and KPIs to measure success?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about, direct response campaigns, right? Mm-hmm. And so whenever we talk about anybody's recruitment marketing budget, we're talking about direct response campaigns versus employer branding campaigns. And direct response is when, you are hair on fire, you need applicants, right? You have X amount of jobs, you need to drive a certain amount of applicants. So when we run those campaigns, it's much more like an advertising campaign on Indeed or LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter. We know that people have a very high degree of intent to apply for a job. So we expect a direct response from spending money on those advertising channels. So that's the first one, and then
get an example on that, just to pinpoint it for people. Let's say, I don't know, your client is a water park and they've got a bunch of summer jobs open in all aspects of running the park. That would be a direct response campaign.
Correct. Yeah, that'd be a direct response campaign. Like, I mean, even, that's a good example, especially seasonal right now. Like, so you've got to ramp that up, and that happens with back to school, that happens with holidays. People have got to, we're looking for people with a really high degree of intent because we really need to fill those roles and fill those jobs. And that's where the job board world becomes, the best place to find those people with a high level of intent.
Got it. Okay. And now the other one, employer branding campaigns, break those down for us.
Yeah. So if we have a client who generally needs to create more awareness about their brand in the marketplace. I mean, even companies that are, 100-year-old companies sometimes still have a challenge with being recognized as an employer. And so employer branding, the intent and goal there is to drive awareness as an employer. It's really important to have your, well-defined employer brand and all those things that you can bring to market and talk about, how to attract that talent. You don't really see a lot of companies doing that on a national basis. You do see people targeting, certain geographic areas. If we have technology companies, you might target, 5 different markets: San Francisco, New York, Boston, RTP, and you could kind of go out and do these employer branding campaigns in very specific geographies to create awareness. You could do them in regions. You could do them very much locally too.
And with an employer branding campaign, is there an actual job posting link to it? Or is it a matter of just like, join our talent community to be in our pipeline so that when a role opens up, you're the first we reach out to? Something like that.
It's a really good question. It does vary by client, so if we have and we're just talking with a client that's opening a new hospital in a certain market. So in that case, we want to create awareness, but we are driving people back to a landing page. So the key metric, because we're creating awareness, is a CPM, or a cost per 1,000 impressions. But we are trying to see, what are the click-through rates on those ads, for advertising on weather.com and CNN and ESPN. Or Spotify and YouTube and those things. We're still trying to create some interaction. And that interaction could go to a landing page that has, just join our talent community, as you mentioned, but it could have, hey, this is exciting news. We have these types of job openings. But it's really hard to catch someone with their resume ready to go when they're listening to Spotify. So if we're really just trying to get, name, email, maybe area of interest, 3 to 5 fields, get them, in that talent community or in a lead capture form so the recruiting team can follow up with them. And then eventually you can, get them to a full apply.
That's so clever. And, my little hamster in my hamster wheel is churning over here. And she's thinking, I bet companies that maybe have not got great reviews on Glassdoor right now, what an opportunity to change the mindset in a region or area where maybe some recent employees had tarnished the reputation of the employee brand, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really big factor as well. I mean, clearly you've got to do the work in-house to fix the native problems that maybe cause those employees. But I think that once you do that, or as you're doing that in parallel, trying to get the word out or trying to create, I mean, there's a reason why Coca-Cola still advertises so much, right? The brand is so many, over 100 years old, and they're like, well, everybody knows Coca-Cola, but they continue to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising. And I think as the HR side of the house, the employer brand side of the house, like people kind of like, are hesitant. The budgets just aren't as big. And it's just really critical to get your name out there as an employer to, kind of encourage people when they're ready to apply for a job to, have that multi-touch brand recognition, and that way have a better chance of getting them to apply to my jobs.
And Neil, tell me if I am doing a gross generalization here, but as a, everyday Sally human being here, I imagine there is a hard time filling lower paying jobs, and there is an influx of incredible talent that want high paying white collar jobs. And so I imagine there's challenges on both sides of the spectrum of, gosh, I just need people who are reliable and great and smart and organized to even show up to the interview on this side of the spectrum. And then I've got, an abundance of applicants to choose from. So, when you kind of look at those two sides of the spectrum and where recruitment struggles, what advice would you give people in talent acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in that hourly space, we see people move for very low dollar amounts, right? 20, 50 cents more an hour, $1 more an hour. And as
they'll leave a job and go to another for 50 cents an hour.
Yeah, 50 cents an hour, $1 an hour. Like, I mean, it's just, every dollar counts, right? In that kind of marketplace. And I think that, if you're, and you start thinking about, should I just pay more and keep them happy? Or once I have them in the door, so you've got to really think about, retention, immediately as someone's walking in the door, right? Someone's, and I think that's an important part for most organizations to keep people on board, whether it's a, entry level job or hourly job like that, or whether it is a high level engineering job. I think it's a challenge that we're, it's almost like devaluing, all the work that went into it to get that person in the door if we don't have a plan.
Exactly. That's what I'm just thinking. My goodness, you do all this effort in recruitment marketing, you're tracking all the data, and you stumble in the onboarding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the onboarding could be a challenge, or 3 months later, or maybe I never talked to my direct manager, and now I'm talking to them, and I'm like, oh my God, is this what I expected? And again, I think it comes down to like realistic expectations, making sure you're matching what you promised through that process of advertising. And
1,000%. All right. So talent acquisition folks out there, that you have what's called an ATS system, an applicant tracking system. And that's, boy, howdy, a buzzword for job seekers out there in the world. It's like, how do they beat the ATS system? How do they get their resume in front of recruiters? But let's talk shop from the TA point of view. How can talent acquisition teams better integrate their recruitment data with their existing ATS systems? Like, how should they set up that tracking, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, we talk about that as like a level of data assurance. If you're setting up a campaign and you're spending dollars, whenever we do that for a client, we always test the links, and we make sure that when we set a campaign, we have a test link, and we do a test application all the way in, so we can see, does that ATS with our test application show that the recruitment advertising dollars went to the ATS and they registered as ZipRecruiter, or they registered as Indeed, or they registered as LinkedIn or Google AdWords. So part of it is like, people just aren't doing the front end plumbing to check the links and make sure that those dollars are being reflective of the candidates that end up in the ATS. So,
which is such a Captain Obvious duh thing, but like, just to give recruiters and TA folks a bit of empathy, they're running 90 billion miles an hour, and a lot of talent acquisition teams went through massive layoffs in 2023. So they're still hiring the same volume of people, but with less recruiters. And so I just, it breaks my heart when I think about that for job seekers out there that are like, I am submitting a resume into a black hole, never getting a confirmation, never hearing back from a person. But gosh, this is so important for them to test the system. You set up an ad on ZipRecruiter or Spotify. You want to make sure that it clicks through and the applicant gets to the list and gets in the ATS system.
Yeah, it's getting in the system and then just being recorded as a source. So we have something to analyze. If we spent that dollar, going back to like when we spend $1, it has to be measured. And I think that for recruiters, it's not, it's not a lack of interest or diligence. It's just kind of overwhelming sometimes. It's not what they do. This is digital marketing and digital advertising, and rolling up their sleeves and trying to figure out how tracking links work. It's just not probably not part of the job description. And
Yeah.
that's okay. It's just a matter of that's why we have the problem we have, where so many companies are still struggling in 2024 with things that, on the consumer advertising side is second nature, because that is people's job, to measure, make all that tracking work, to measure those advertising dollars. And I mean, well, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. That's why I got into the business. Like, I think that there's, I was at Monster and we were promoting that brand, and we tracked every dollar, and I thought that people on the recruiting side need that help, because every dollar they spend is really important.
And I think, to your point, as you said, I mean, recruitment teams aren't typically super IT tech savvy, or, have a deep level of data analyst experience. And so I imagine that's where bringing a partner in like HireClix, it can be really helpful to run alongside that team and say, hey, this is how you integrate. And I'm sure in some ways, it's very simple to integrate it together, test it, and make sure before you run on a campaign, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, again, it's not rocket science, but I think it takes labor. Like, even if you had the TA person that knew how to set up all the tracking links, and that way every dollar they spent did get tracked all the way through to the ATS, you still have, let's say, 5, 6, 10 advertising sources, and you have the ATS data, and you still have to pull it all together. So there's, kind of like spreadsheet magic that, it needs to happen, or, or Google Sheet magic, or whatever you want to call it. And so that's part of our relationship, and our job is to, take all the data from those disparate sources and bring them back into one interface, so a decision maker can see all their campaigns in one spot. And I think that that's probably the even more daunting challenge that people are looking at, even if they have all the tracking set up properly.
And are you guys testing any new AI technologies to help you kind of do that mass data analysis?
So that's where our next phase of our reporting will, kind of lead to, is that, we see the first impact on AI with, chatbots in the recruiting space, with chatbots and job descriptions. And I think for us, trying to have an AI assistant that'll help us, analyze the data is where we want to go. We're actually using AI in creative as well to help us build multiple versions of things. Like, so it's creepy. I mean, it was probably slower to adopt, but it is creeping in everywhere, and it doesn't seem like you can stop it right now.
For sure. We've been interviewing quite a few people on the podcast these last few months about their angle of what they see with AI and how it's changing the way we work. So if this is something of curiosity for you, please do continue to listen to the Simplifiers podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
So, back to those employer branding campaigns. I mean, I imagine you're also, potentially have a goal or a KPI of, tracking number of followers to, say, I don't know, the company's Instagram account, or seeing if, campaigns that are A/B tested, A is one image, B is another image, or A is one call to action and B is another call to action, and seeing what's most effective, right?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it comes to employer branding, the creative really matters. And I think that, again, that's an area where recruiting and talent acquisition doesn't always get the resources to be successful. And so if we have a branding campaign, and if we're spending dollars in that category, we want to always be doing an A/B test. I mean, you really and the way that we measure that is that if one ad has a click-through rate of 0.5%, and another ad has a click-through rate of 2.5%. Well, that's how we judge, do candidates see that as interesting and engaging? And so we would, do more of something that's similar to the 2.5% click-through rate, and we'd retire the ad that got the lower click-through rate. And so you always want to constantly be refreshing your creative and content that you're using on those employer branding campaigns.
And also the thought occurred to me that poor HR division has to have so many hats on, have to be such experts at so many parts of the business, that also, if the recruitment marketing that you're putting out there, the language, the graphics, the fonts, the overall look and feel feels nothing like the TV commercials they're watching online or on their TV for the actual brand itself, then there's going to be a misalignment there as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think in corporate marketing gets very anxious if it's not built by them. It's not built here. Then they're like, but then they also just don't sometimes have the bandwidth to get to help, to help the HR team with their employer branding and their landing pages and banner ads and materials. And so it's really like striking the right balance of, getting the corporate brand guidelines, looking at the creative they have out there, and making sure that we've had these hundreds of these conversations with corporate marketing of like, our job is to curate that brand, make a child of that brand that is, that falls in line, but also, help the HR team by creating a call to action that meets our needs. We have to create awareness as an employer, not as a consumer brand or B2B brand, and we have to drive those applicants. And so I think that's really the unique way we try and explain it, because I'd say 90% of HR teams just don't get enough attention from corporate marketing.
No,
that's probably not going to change. It's not going to change anytime soon.
I've worked in-house at major corporates where even just sharing files like corporate graphics and photography and images and videos was like pulling teeth. And
absolutely,
like, hang on, we all work for the same company,
right?
We all have the same goals ultimately. So I think it's really interesting. So now I want to come back to our pen here, because this is a perfect segue. Why is it that some company career sites, let's just say it, are terrible? They need a serious refresh. What would you recommend to organizations to do to improve their benefits page and also their job application page on their company site? Break those both down. What are they?
Yeah, so there's, I'll give you some anecdotal data in that same category. I was at an HR conference where I was speaking and talking about the candidate experience. And when we think about that, we think about career sites as that main front door to welcome everyone in. And it's probably about 100 HR executives in the audience. This particular event was a healthcare HR conference. And I asked the group, how many people are proud of their career site? And, asked to raise their hand. And one person raised their hand. And they had just launched their new career site. So this is all like, people are self-aware of it. It's just, I think it's an overwhelming problem to kind of face and tackle, but it is the front door. And so I would say when it comes to things like the benefits page and the overall like life here and, what are the resources and all that kind of good stuff, a lot of it comes down to the solutions in the marketplace aren't easy to work with. So again, I started way back when the early days of the internet, in 1996 is when I worked in e-commerce originally. And like a lot of cases, our experience on the candidate side is a lot like that, right? And I think that what people expect, right? You can't go from Amazon to Nike.com and then you come to apply for a job and you get like slapped in the face with this like very archaic site and this very archaic process. So I think that we have to challenge ourselves in the HR and recruiting space to match an e-commerce, a modern e-commerce experience in order to, really up conversions. When we have a career site, we, let's say we're getting 3%, 5% conversions today. If we revamp that career site, the biggest factor is, typically increasing conversions because we're spending money to get those people back to the site. How do we go from a 3% conversion rate to a 12% conversion rate? And the ROI, just goes through the roof when we do things like that.
And conversion in this point is somebody that's gone to the career page, the benefits page, and then later came back and said, oh, okay, I'm going to click through and apply. That's the conversion, right?
Correct. Yeah, we would call that would be the main conversion. A lot of our clients have a talent community option as well. So we, again, we value that less, right? If you just like you're thinking about retail e-commerce transactions, the purchase, the application is worth more than just the lead,
right.
In the short term. So I think that's really what we're trying to improve career sites to get more conversions. And, I think that's really just something that people are kind of throwing good money after bad if they're, kind of have a bad advertising strategy, have a bad, candidate experience. And then you imagine like how hard that is to continue on. And I think that's where a lot of HR leaders and TA leaders are right now. It's like, well, I don't really, where do I start? Right. And imagine if they don't have an employee value proposition either. Right. Like, so they're kind of like, just like, they're shackled with all these weights as they're, trudging through the woods to complete their mission.
Yeah, I mean, I think about a career page or a benefits page. I mean, ultimately, I want it to be visually stunning to me, but real true, like you say, reflective of what the culture of the company is. So I want it to reiterate the mission, vision, core values. Yes, I would love to have more information about the benefits package, the total rewards that create my compensation package, but I want to be able to visualize myself working there. And so it's not, for me, not a lot of words on the screen. It's more visual elements. It's more testimonials from actual real employees. It's a diversity of, backgrounds and ages and real people telling me things, not just like, clip art and
CEOs, the 3-minute CEO video, right? Like,
right,
it's hard to relate to that. Yeah.
Stock photography, is not their company. Like that's the first thing where I go, red flag. Is this a real legit company, or, is this actually where I want to go? And then I also really struggle, and this is just coming from the job applicant point of view. You see a shiny careers page, and then you click through to the job posting, and it's like literally from 1984. And it's just a terrible interface where you upload your resume and then it goes, oh, can you manually add in all of the information into the 20 or so questions about your job experience? It's like, ugh. At that point, I'm like, ugh, what's the point?
And again, like, when you have like one-click buy options, right? It's just something that like you're not going to tolerate it. Or, like we talk a lot right now about the 4 generations in the workplace, right? And one generation we've had some research that came out, and that the older generations, boomers and Gen X, may tolerate it because they're used to it, but millennials and Gen Z are going to have a lower tolerance for any type of interaction like that.
Mm-hmm. So you spend all those marketing dollars, and they get to the actual place to apply, and they're like, "No, screw this.
Yeah, not buying today. Not buying today. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. We just had an episode recently on the podcast. Dana Dillard, she actually broke down the 5 generations in the workplace. So the generation above baby boomers, she calls them the traditionalists, and the breakdown of what each will tolerate and how they view their work, which I think is, again, fascinating when it comes to recruitment marketing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's huge opportunities in segmenting your messaging and audience, and you can still have it all come from the same EVP. It's just a matter of like, how am I going to have those authentic, to your point earlier, those authentic conversations with each generation? And then you have to split that by like the types of jobs. Marketing to an engineer is very different to marketing to someone who works in the warehouse and the retail store. So,
and again, I like how you said, really mirroring the best practices of e-commerce, because like you get onto Amazon, one click buy, you don't even have to press the purchase button at this point. It's like, do you want it? Okay, great. It's yours.
Yeah. Sometimes I've purchased before I even realized I purchased it now. It's just so easy. It's like, oh, wait, that's already done. Like I thought I had to, nope, you've got my credit card and everything. We're good.
And I realized that applying for jobs and filling great talent into great roles is not quite that easy quite yet. I think there is things to learn to make the process more efficient and make the user experience better. Because ultimately, let's say you apply for a job, it was a nightmare to apply, and then the interview process was terrible and disorganized. They showed up late, and then in the end, they made you do all this work, and then they didn't give you the job. That leaves a real sour taste in your mouth. Do you think you're going to apply again? Probably not. Are you going to tell your 6 closest friends about this horrible experience? Probably yes.
Probably, yeah. I mean, you might end up on Glassdoor, right? Giving some interview feedback.
And
so
then you're going to need to run some campaigns. So if anything that Neil has talked about today intrigues you, I highly, highly recommend checking out his company. It's called HireClix. That's CLIX. All the links are in the show notes over the simplifiers.com. And you can also find where to connect with Neil directly on his LinkedIn or on their Instagram account, HireClix. Now, as we wrap up, Neil, I have a few questions for you that I like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast. So here goes. First and foremost, tell me, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
So I'm reading Man's Search for Meaning right now by Viktor Frankl. And, I don't know if it's just part of like, hitting 50 and having a daughter that's graduated from high school, but I found my way, found myself, discovering the book, and I'm right in the middle of it right now. So it's been a great, I'm really happy that we found each other. That's all. Yeah. Excellent.
Oh, God, that is such a good book. We'll link that up in the show notes for you guys if you want to check that out. So tell me, who is somebody in your network, somebody you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
Whenever whenever I think of someone who just inspires me, I think of Susan Collins. And so Susan worked in recruiting. She was actually one of my customers, one of my very early customers. And, whenever you start a business, you're, you know, trying to survive and trying, up and down. And, we took great care of Susan Collins. She was working at Talbot's as the director of talent acquisition. And she's just like so much positive energy and such a positive person that just always inspiring, we always wanted to work hard for her. I always wanted to work really hard for her. And then we were lucky enough to hire her and bring her on and work for our team for a little while. And then now she's, doing something very entrepreneurial and launched her own coaching business. And so she's just a ray of sunshine and just a super, super person to be connected with. And it's one of those people that whenever you have a conversation or meet up, it's just, you always leave happy.
Yeah, those are the best kind of people in the world.
Definitely.
We will link Susan up in our show notes. So you guys want to see what she's up to in the world. You can find her over at thesimplifiers.com.
Awesome.
So Neil, I believe that simplicity and gratitude go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Oh, I mentioned my daughter. I have two kids. They're 18 and 15, and I'm so happy that they're the young people that they are. So every day I'm very grateful and thankful for them.
Oh, it's so wonderful. My kids are teenagers now too, and boy, howdy, it is every cliche. It goes by so fast.
It really does. It really does. She's leaving. She's a senior, graduating in like 2 weeks and going to college and all that good stuff. It's just awesome. And then my son's in his first year of high school, and they're little people now. And to see that, as all the time that you put into helping them grow and find their way, and to see that come back in spades is awesome.
I love that. So my final question for you today is this, Neil. And again, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Of course.
Someone somewhere is working in talent acquisition. They are underwater in so many ways beyond. And somebody somewhere in the C-suite had said, hey, so tell me about your people data and metrics. And they're like, we don't really know.
Yeah.
What's one thing you could whisper into their ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
Yeah, I think people need to, the best thing I could say is that they just need to embrace the metrics. It's okay to ask why, or, why is this metric where it is, or how did you calculate that metric? It's okay. Just because numbers are on a screen, on a slide, doesn't mean that you aren't welcome to understand the why and how they got there. And I think that that's really where starting off with just kind of natural curiosity about the numbers and embracing them. I think that's the best place to start. They're not scary. It's simple math. Again, it's not physics. It's not calculus. It's pretty straightforward stuff. And, everybody's entitled to know. You shouldn't have to operate in the dark. And especially when you're going to be held accountable by a CEO, CFO, and, CHRO on what's happening with your budget.
Yeah. Start simple.
Yeah.
Again, gathering and tracking that data, start building stories from it, and test and iterate.
Yeah. Even if you have an agency like us, or another agency that, you just ask them, what is this? Why is that number what it is? And, which way is it going, up or down? And, and asking people for transparency is really important. And I think that not everybody feels empowered to do that. And I think it's something that's very simple that they can take on.
Neil, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Mary. I appreciate it.